Alright, guys, it is time to dive into season 4 of Degrassi. There were quite a few major events that happened in this season, which I will get to in separate videos, but let's just go over the highlights. First, we had a couple new characters, Liberty's younger brother Danny and Darcy. Rick returned to Degrassi this season. Marco became the class president, and Alex became his VP. JT and Liberty started dating. And Ellie really integrated into Paige's crew and started living with Sean. We also saw Principal Radish get reassigned and Miss Hasselakas take his place. And lastly, this season had one of their summer two-part season finales. And those are my highlights. Now let's talk about Ellie in season 4 of Degrassi. Ellie's season starts off pretty rocky as her dad is still deployed and her mom is not doing well. Thankfully, her mom checks into rehab and Ellie starts living with Sean, which is a very interesting situation and kind of like one of those this probably wouldn't happen in real life type situations. Two teenagers living together who are in a couple and neither of them have jobs. And even when Sean moved back in with his parents, Ellie was living there by herself, and when her mom got better, she just kept giving her rent money. For a show that's pretty realistic, this is just one of those moments where it didn't seem super realistic to me. But eventually, Ellie did decide to move back in with her mother, with boundaries though, and I'm very happy about that. So at least her season ended on a good note. And now it's time to talk about Craig in season 4 of Degrassi. Craig also had a very up and down season. We see him get back together with Ashley, and things are going well until Ashley's dad's wedding weekend. This is when we start to see a behavior change in Craig, and it is very much so a cause for concern. Luckily, he was able to get the help that he needed, and in the end, he found out that he is bipolar. Now, I believe that this is the first time any student on this show has been given a mental health diagnosis. And in true Degrassi fashion, this is handled very well. Everyone around Craig shows care and concern towards him instead of just thinking that there's something wrong with him. They briefly talk about him being on medication, and it isn't something that is taboo or looked down upon. It's just an aid that's helping him. Now, things are not perfect from that point on. He does have a moment where he goes off his meds, but because of the support system around him, they're there for him and they bring him back and keep him on track. And now it's time to talk about Paige in season 4 of Degrassi. We start off the season seeing her go to court for Dean's trial, and unfortunately, he is found not guilty. Now, these episodes were really hard to watch, so I would just say be cautious. Paige takes the verdict really hard, and she ends up smashing Spinner's car into Dean's, which prompts her to get a job so she can pay Spinner back. She gets a job working with Alex in the mall, and things are starting to get a little better for her. Then she starts dating her teacher, Mr. Oleander, and that also ended horribly. Because of course it gets found out by the school and he ends up losing his job. And because of that, he has to take another job that is far away and they eventually just break up. And she really ends the season in a pretty low place. Now, at first I felt bad for her because of everything that happened with her at the beginning of the season, but after she got involved with her student teacher, it just went awry. And one can only hope that we get some sort of behavioral change from her, especially after the events at the end of the school year pep rally and their prom. And now I'm going to talk about the Rick situation in season 4 of Degrassi. Now, these episodes are very hard to watch, especially with everything that's going on in the nation right now. So if I were you, I would just err on the side of caution. Now, with this situation, we saw how the blame couldn't really fall on just one person. And I can tell that there were just many ways on how this whole situation could have been avoided. Now, considering what happened between Rick and Terry, I'm sure many people, including myself, were questioning why Rick would return to Degrassi. And this was brought up, and he said that it was because he liked Degrassi. And I guess he thought that being the new kid at a school that was full of new people and a completely different environment was worse than going back to Degrassi, a school that he knows where just a group of kids don't like him. And even though he was able to make friends and even Jimmy started to lighten up to him, he still suffered through a lot of bullying, which in my opinion, Radish could have handled a lot better. But that eventually led to him bringing a gun to school and shooting and injuring Jimmy, and also with Rick losing his life in the end. Now, with the world that we live in and just how this show is, I'm not surprised that they had an episode like this. Like I said earlier, it was very hard to watch, but it was very real. And this show portrayed how it really affected the students long term, even after just the 2-part episode that the situation took place in. Now I'll be focusing on the aftermath of the Rick situation, and in this video I'm going to be specifically talking about Sean. Now, Sean was the one who ended up de-escalating the situation. After that, everyone was treating him like a hero, but forgot that as a result of that situation, Rick died. And Sean had a hard time dealing with all of that. It took him some time to actually face what he was feeling. And it did lead him back to his parents and him making the decision that the best place for him in that time was to be with his parents. And I honestly believe that that's where he needed to be. Now, Sean had been on his own for a while and he carries himself as a tough guy. And that makes it easy to forget that he's just a kid. And he could not deal with what he went through alone or with the support of his peers. He really needed his parents. And that was the last time we saw Sean this season. And now it's time to talk about Emma and how the Rick situation took a toll on her. Now, Emma, of course, knew what happened between Rick and Terry, but she was not a part of that friend group. But she did take it upon herself to lead everyone in making Rick's life a living hell. Now, her first approach was to raise awareness about DV and to take donations, which I thought was fine. But then she quickly turned into a bully. But that escalated beyond her comfort level, and she ended up stopping Jay and Alex from beating Rick up. Now, her relationship with Rick did get better thanks to the whole trivia team, but that quickly reverted when he expressed that he had feelings for her and she rejected him. And that's what made her a target on Rick's list. And because of that, we see a complete behavior change with Emma. She starts sneaking out and lying to her parents, hanging out with Jay at the ravine, and that resulted in her getting an STD. Now, I think that this show was trying to portray how trauma affects different people and how it can affect their decision-making after the fact. On the one hand, you have Sean, who is a tough guy who ends up breaking down, being vulnerable, and running to his parents. And on the other end, you have Emma, who is the girl next door and who completely rejects that image. And now it's time to talk about Spinner in season 4 of Degrassi. Spinner went through a lot this season. First, he was with Paige, and he treated her so horribly that it was no surprise that they eventually broke up. And then he got with Manny, who didn't even really want anything serious to begin with, and so they were kind of like not together, not exclusive, yes exclusive, kind of a mess. But the question I really want to focus on is Spinner really that good of a friend? Because he started getting caught up with Jay, and they started bullying Rick, and were the reason why Rick went after Jimmy. And this is the second time that he's treated one of his best friends poorly, and this time it ended tragically. And I know he eventually came clean to not just Jimmy, but also to the principal and took his punishment, expulsion. But why is he still treating his friends so poorly? And these aren't just random people like Jay. These are people that have known him for years and have stuck by him for years. And it's no surprise that they all wanted absolutely nothing to do with him after all of that came out. And now he's on his redemption journey. And now it's time to talk about the season 4 finale of Degrassi. Now, it is Degrassi fashion to have a multiple part finale that is kind of like its own isolated storyline. And that's what we got in season 4. Kevin Smith comes to town to film a movie that takes place at a school, and he decides to use Degrassi. He hires students to not only act, but to also work on the set of the movie, and he also asks Craig to write a song for the movie. Now, these episodes focus a lot on Caitlin and Joey and their drama that unfortunately ends with them breaking up. I'm sure the folks that watched Degrassi High were happy that Caitlin and Joey got some more screen time, but I don't think they were too happy with the results of that screen time. Craig is also a huge focus in this episode as he decides that he is going to go off his meds and he runs away. Now, this is a very scary situation because he's not just running to like Jimmy or Marco, he is out on the streets. And it does not go well for him at all. Luckily, Joey does find him and brings him back home. Now, the finale does end on a high note with them wrapping the movie and celebrating. And that is all I have for season 4 of Degrassi. Please leave your thoughts in the comments below about how you thought about the season. And of course, stay tuned because season 5 is next.